Sarah Tuberty grew up with a congenital limb difference. She completed her clinical doctorate in occupational therapy in 2019 and works in collaborative, non-traditional occupational therapy settings with an emphasis on decreasing the stigma towards the disability community by engaging with conversations within education and advocacy. She co-founded and co-hosted Disarming Disability podcast, featuring candid conversations with experts on all things disability. She co-founded and co-produced 2 Philly Fringe shows in 2002 and 2022 and 2023 with Watermelon Bathtub, an accessible theater company emphasizing storytelling and circus arts, and also just a fantastic name of an organization. And she's co-authored the handbook, an informational guide for parents and children with hand differences. She's now in her 3rd year of a PhD program in occupational therapy and travels all around the world in her 13th year as a flight attendant. So let's welcome Sarah to the stage. Sarah is with the left sleeve rolled up and her left hand ends around the knuckle level. Sarah.
Okay, yes, we can hear that come through okay? Okay, wonderful. All right, let's hang out with me. It's a Friday night. It's 2018. I'm 28 years old. I'm with my girlfriends at a bar. We're having a lot of fun. We've ordered our drinks. We're like snuggled into a nice little booth. And I am in my 2nd year of occupational therapy program. So my mind is like filled with disability theory and disability stigma. So I decide to be very brave this evening. And I'm going to put my hand on the table. Whereas typically my hand is hidden in my lap, or it's hidden in sweatshirts, or really anywhere. I spent the past 20 years of my life spending a lot of effort to conceal myself. So this time I've made the decision to put my hand on the table. And maybe no one will notice. Maybe it'll be okay. Lies. Mike and his friends swoop into the booth next to us. And within seconds, he's asking me, what happened to your hand? So I take a deep breath. Because honestly, I don't know. This is a congenital limb difference, so I don't know what happened to my hand. And that's not a really satisfying answer, so people have a tough time responding to that. So Mike, of course, he says, oh, so you were born deformed. So I'm like, okay, this is seconds after deciding that I'm going to be brave. And here I am having this conversation when really I just want to be spending a fun time with my friends. And so much of my life has been spent trying to avoid this conversation because it's incredibly, that's awful feeling. I mean, even saying it now, I'm like, oh, I can feel that anxiety of it. But I've decided that I want to be brave and that I don't want to be crying in bathrooms anymore and that I want to stay present in these spaces. So instead, take another deep breath and I say, let's try that again. And it felt really empowering because I really like this phrase because it's a way that I can keep control of the conversation where I'm not feeling terrible about myself. I don't have all of that shame. But it also really invites conversation for the other person to engage with me. It's not like a snapback where I'm completely shutting them down, although I could have, I suppose. But I really appreciate this phrase. And honestly, this isn't Mike's fault. I am very likely the first person that he's ever encountered that has a limb difference. So I can understand that he's like, what do you mean? How is this possible? Everyone I've met in my life up until this point has 10 fingers. And so I really feel like it's our educational spaces that there just isn't enough representation. And I feel like that conversation has been happening over and over again, hopefully on a big scale, but definitely here in this room, about how important representation is. And that's what I really love about coming to the Mütter Museum. When I came here for the first time, I saw the wall on teratology, and I saw for the first time, evidence of my existence. And not just me here today, but the history that there's been people with my type of limb difference that has existed before me, and we exist here today. There's actually thousands of us, and that will continue existing in the future. And I felt like this was a museum that was for me, this was my home. There were so many of us that had very similar life experiences to what mine is coming here, whereas typically when we learn about disability, it's sort of like an asterisk, or it's an appendix, or this is what things should look like, this is how the body should look like, this is where things should be in a body, and maybe there's this thing over here that's different. and it creates that power imbalance where it's here is the able-bodied people and here is the disability community, which is why I felt so much pressure for so much of my life to try to be as able as I could and to really conceal and to hide my disability identity. But it's also really exhausting to be in that space. And what I'm really excited about what we're doing here today and sort of talking with Sarah and these conversations about the future of the Mütter Museum is that this is really the opportunity where the Mütter Museum is saying, let's try this again, because there has been such a history of not telling disability well and having these parts of us being very much objectified, which then leads to these conversations where it becomes like these, I mean, people have asked me very inappropriate things where like, listen, I'm just trying to shop. Like, I don't need to have this whole conversation about how I do all these different things. So I really am excited that this provides a pathway and an opportunity to really embed what it means to be a person in a disabled body, what it means to be a part of the disability community, and to hear that, just as Katie had said, like, I'm not someone that needs to be fixed. I'm not somebody that needs to be like cured. I might need some tools and I might need some resources and I might need some adaptive strategies, but this is how we can engage, particularly with the medical community, on how we can work together in partnership. And I'm really excited and hopeful for the future of that so that we can create these kinder, more accepting societies and like social groups so that we can all feel really proud of ourselves to show up in our true forms and feel like we don't have to conceal ourselves so that we can all like have our hands out on the table.
What happened to Mike?
Oh, Mike. He continued to behave poorly, and then he was really offended when I didn't give him my phone number. And I said, Mike, this didn't go well for you.
Well, still out there to this day, wondering what. So key listeners sort of to my introduction might have heard the phrase circus arts in your bio. And said, tell me more. So I think another fun thing that's come out in our conversations is that you have a life full of so many fun pursuits. I think I said to you in our first conversation, like you're an aerial artist and a flight attendant, and I'm like, this sounds like the combination that my 10-year-old niece would like describe as her aspirational adulthood in the same way that I was like, I'm gonna be an astronaut and a rock star. But I wanted to like, could you say a little more about your life in the circus arts? Like, how did you get involved? What's the, like, just literally tell me anything about it. I have no idea.
Oh, it is so fun. Highly recommend, 10 out of 10. I grew up with a dance background, and the dance background that I grew up in was very prescriptive, so that you have to move this way, this is how your body is supposed to exist in these spaces. When you have a body that isn't what the typical expectation of what bodies are, it can get a little complicated. So I didn't really enjoy that space, but I still love dance. And I took 4 years in between my undergrad degree and my doctorate degree in occupational therapy, and I was a flight attendant and have still did both of those together, but I knew it was gonna be so hard to go from like running around the world in airplanes to having to like sit in lectures. And so I saw that my school had a like circus class that you could do recreationally, and I loved it because it's less about how your body is supposed to do the skill and more about like, here is an apparatus. So it could be a trapeze, or it could be the silks or the fabrics, or different names for those, or it could be the lyra, which is the hoop, it's suspended. And it's just, how does your body interact with this apparatus? And there's tons of variation within that. And I understand that as a person that has a limb difference, like there's lots of skills in there that are not accessible to me, but there's also thousands of things that I can do because I have a limb difference. And one of them being like my elbow. I carry my entire life in my elbow, so I'm really good at cool elbow things on the circus arts. I can just hang completely upside down. So I take classes at the Philadelphia School of Circus Arts here, so definitely check them out, they're wonderful.
Very cool. Yeah, I carry your student elbow, so I'm very envious of that. And yeah, I've just always been amazed whenever I see someone do anything from the circus arts. I'm like, it couldn't be me. Yeah, I have no idea. So I really love that whole field. And I guess really as kind of, you got to a lot of this in your story, and I really love the way that you characterize this moment as a sort of like, let's try this again moment. And I know that we got connected because a couple of years ago, kind of pre-COVID, you had reached out to the museum really just with an offer to like rethink some of the labeling in the museum, you know, sort of from a visit that you were doing. And I just wondered if you could share a little bit more about that experience, because I think sometimes, you know, people will go through a museum and maybe see something where they're like, I don't know about that, but then they just sort of leave, right? And maybe carry that experience with them. But you took that extra step of reaching out to say, like, like, I've got a different perspective on this, let me help. So I wonder, if you could just share a little bit about that, if you remember, what in particular sort of prompted that, or even just sort of give examples of like the type of language difference that you think really makes a difference to how people experience the same object or the same exhibit.
Oh yeah, great question. I felt everything that I was learning within my disability studies classes was that a lot of people felt less frustrated about how their bodies looked and functioned and operated, and felt more frustrated about all of the social barriers, and sort of like Katie had shared with us that there's that social model of disability where it's less about there's something wrong with my body and that it's not my fault that things aren't accessible. It's more about the external context and the environments that we live in that are preventing me from being able to access the things that I need to and want to. So from that, I just feel that the language that we use, the words that we use to describe ourselves, the words that we use to describe the things around us are like so deeply powerful. And especially if these are the education points where we're then teaching other people that haven't interfaced at all with any of these things, just how even more important it is to be really mindful of the language. And I remember visiting the teratology section and feeling this like wonderful sense of community, because these are representations of people's bodies who are like mine. But at the same time, teratology means like the study of monsters. So just like how deeply ingrained that has been, and like what the expectation that like someone thinks of my body as being monstrous, which is then connected to why Mike called me deformed, and like that's kind of what the general narrative is. So I just was really excited to be like, okay, I came out with this degree in occupational therapy. I'm really interested in the social stigma work. So like, how can we help rephrase things? Within occupational therapy, they talk a lot about person first language, while ability first language is also, both are wonderful ways to describe things. But really hoping to recenter, like, who is this person, and describing the elements of them rather than being like medical, like objects, is what I was really excited about.
Cool. Thank you so much. And yeah, huge round of applause to Sarah.